here we are. I should probably hydrate. Hydration is key. Hello, everybody. Howdy, howdy. Oh, I should probably... that way, so that I'm not obstructing everything. Hope everybody's having a good day. Anxiety raises. Why would your anxiety raise? Welcome, welcome. I need more water. You guys know the drill. The drill today is... oh, how's my audio? Okay, my audio is still clean. The drill today... oh, I need to make sure that I attach... I'm sorry, I haven't been grabbing the TikTok comments. I should be able to now. Big congrats on your paper getting in a journal. So, I mean, being frank, the paper was published a year ago. It's just I wasn't publicly de-anonymized up until, you know, a few weeks ago. And so now I have the chance to talk about these papers that I'm particularly proud of in the open on my channel. So, you know, now we can talk about them, even though that paper was, you know, published and accepted like a year ago. All right, let's read some super chats, or not super chats. Let's read some regular chats and answer some questions. Why do bachelor's and master's engineers I know achieve more real-world outcomes than PhDs? Well, generally you get a PhD in engineering if you want to do research, rather than if you want to just go work at a company and produce products. And producing products is probably what you're referring to when you say achieving real-world outcomes. Can I find a job with an astrophysics degree? It depends on what your specialty is. Can you explain photons? Photons are just excitations of the electromagnetic field. You can imagine the electromagnetic field as being in a certain shape, and that's what controls the way that or that charges attract each other and repel each other. And photons are localized bumps in that field. One way to think about it anyway. Can you make a single ant or fish from nothing? Can I? No, I'm not a biologist or a chemist or something. How would one get into the astrophysics field? Well, you'd start by getting 2 or perhaps 3 degrees in astrophysics. Quick question, why does gravity even work? I'm not sure what the question is getting at. Gravity, as far as we can tell, is the curvature of space-time. Matter, stuff with mass, stuff with energy, stuff with pressure and momentum, this curves space-time and causes that curvature. And that curvature then affects everything else. Are scalar waves real, quantum waves, and how are they real? So scalar electromagnetic waves are not real, no. But there is one scalar wave, and it's the Higgs boson. Is the lava lamp a reference to Cloudflare's entropy source? It is, and it's also our new god. How much linear algebra does your work use? Directly, very, very little, but indirectly, quite a lot. What is the scale of an atom? Like, what are the big parts and what are the small parts? So, an atom is roughly going to be 1/10 of a nanometer across. And that's like the full extent of the atom, most of which is just the electron cloud. The electron cloud takes up most of the space in the atom. The nucleus of the atom is about, what, 10,000 times smaller than that? I think. So, how black holes have so big gravity? Because they have a lot of mass. Do you think you're smarter than Albert Einstein? Probably not. He was a perhaps once in a species genius. Wait, we have a new god? Yeah, the lava lamp. We hailed the lava lamp. Do you think we'll ever eventually observe the graviton? I'm kind of skeptical. I mean, maybe. Who can say what tech will be like in 1,000 years, but... Do you think biologists are more useful to humans than physicists? It depends on what you mean by more useful. Yeah, indeed, the lamp does ground all intelligibility. True. True. Why does my back hurt? God, it's just... I'm just getting old, I think. I heard that photons act as waves in molecules or something along those lines, but no, so photons are always waves. They're waves in the electromagnetic field. But sometimes they're localized and sometimes they're more spread out. Would you say modern physics is a real description of reality or just accurate math? I would say that it's probably a more real description of reality than, say, classical physics was. Does time change depending on the planet you're on? The rate at which your watch will tick relative to some distant person will change depending on which planet you're on, but it's a very, very small amount. Are you taking guests? Not immediately, no. What's your IQ? I don't know. Why is there a universe instead of nothing in the first place? That's not a physics question. What's your thoughts on antimatter? I believe it, but it seems so simple it sounds made up. And it's real, we make it all the time. In fact, we use antimatter in some medical treatments, or some medical diagnostics. What's the point of CERN? They do particle physics. That's the point. They're a particle physics laboratory. I'm gonna scroll down to the bottom so I don't miss more. Do you think physicists live with an objective lens that borders on fascistic? No? What are Yang-Mills equations? The Yang-Mills equations are sort of the generalized version of the Maxwell equations. Whereas the Maxwell's equations are the equations that you get from a U1 gauge bundle, or a U1 symmetry group for your gauge field. The Yang-Mills are the equivalent, but for arbitrary, perhaps non-abelian gauge groups. So think of it as like the equations that describe the more sophisticated versions of the electromagnetic force that you get for, or the electromagnetic field that you get for like the strong nuclear force or the weak nuclear force. How does redshift work? So you can just think of an object emitting, so if we're talking about light, you can think of an object emitting light as like emitting a peak and then a trough and then a peak and then a trough. And if you speed it up, then you would literally get light. And so the idea is that if a thing is moving away from you, the peaks will be further apart than they would have been from the perspective of the person doing the emitting, based on how fast they're going. Because the distance between peaks will be greater because they're moving away in between peaks. Is it possible to simulate gravity in a useful way when traveling through space? Yeah, just spin. Biologists keep people alive, but physicists just string theories. So biologists don't keep people alive, those are doctors. Physicists are also involved in medicine. For example, there's such a thing as nuclear medicine, which came from physicists. Physicists produce research that is important in other ways. What are your thoughts on some of the seemingly physics-defying UAPs recently disclosed by the government? I'm not convinced that any of them are physics-defying. What's the key distinctions between MOND and GR? MOND is not covariant, hasn't been covariantized as far as I know. So, and it's kind of ad hoc. There's not like a mechanism that's understood there, as far as I can tell. If the universe has always existed, how is it possible to arrive at now? I don't understand. So, to arrive at now means to have started at some point in the past. So, given any point in the past, you could definitely get to now, right? The question is what's the point in the past that you're starting at? And if there's an eternal past, there's not some infinitely far away that you're starting at. Infinitely far away in the past isn't a place in time, or isn't a moment in time. So given any pair of moments, there's always a finite amount of time between them. How does quantum physics affect the free will versus determinism debate? It doesn't really, but what it does do is it adds a third option, which is that there is some indeterminacy that's neither free will nor deterministic. Why aren't there more nuclear reactors? Well, there was a lot of fear about nuclear energy in the 80s, and it takes a long time to build nuclear reactors. So if there was fear in the 80s and 90s, and it takes 20 years to get a nuclear reactor online, then you can understand why there wouldn't be very many today. You still make lasers? I haven't in a long time. My laser collection is sitting under a bed at my in-laws' house. Are you a creationist? No. When biologists try to understand things on a fundamental level, they bump up against quantum mechanics. True. How hard is it to get a PhD in physics? Well, it's definitely not easy. And I don't think it's something that anybody could do if they just put their mind to it. But, okay, actually, that's not correct. I think that anybody could do it if they start early enough in their life. But I think that by the time you're 25, Not to say that, like, you know, your chances are 0, but it just gets harder as you get older because people tend to be more set in their ways and things like that. Do you think dark matter is real or is just a placeholder theory for unexplainable gravity? I think that dark matter is probably a real kind of stuff. Do you really believe Richard Feynman is fully self-taught? No, obviously not. He got a PhD from a university. Why do current spacecraft not spin to simulate gravity? Well, because we don't really need them to. We don't need to simulate gravity. Not like maybe if we had, like, you know, decades long or years long journeys, but nobody's up in space for that long. How did a mathematical physics course differ from physics or theoretical physics? There isn't a mathematical physics course. Mathematical physics is just the kind of physics that I do. It's not like a specific course. I mean, I guess it is at some universities, but not where I went. Can I get a reminder on how we proved Kirchhoff's voltage law? Kirchhoff's voltage law is just a result from the part of Maxwell's equation that says that the curl of the electric field is 0. Well, or rather, it's the rate of change of the magnetic field. But the Kirchhoff's voltage law is, well, yeah. So that's where Kirchhoff's voltage law comes from, or the loop law rather. From Ninja in the first degree with the $5. If you lock a gyroscope to an inward-outward radial on a rotating ring, won't the lock gyro resist the ring's rotation, trying to stay on one axis? Yeah. Yeah. From Gerain with the $5. I did want to go into physics when I was younger, but math hurts my brain. That's fair. That's fair. Look, you do you. What do you think about the alien files? I think that there's basically nothing new in them. Just a whole bunch more grainy stills and grainy footage. Do you think there's a limit to how far tech can advance? I don't even know what that would mean. How does a galaxy stay together and does it just float around? Well, it's gravitationally bound together. Is Einstein real? I mean, he was. He's dead now. Theoretically, if a speaker plays high enough frequency, can it produce light? No. So sound waves are just pressure waves in air, whereas light has to be waves in an electromagnetic field. What are your research areas of expertise? So currently I'm doing cosmology stuff, like early universe model building. I also have an expertise in conformal hypersurface geometry, or more specifically conformal geometry. I dabble a little bit in quantum gravity. I've done some stuff on black holes, so generally stuff that involves gravity, space-time. Does the ISS spin like in Project Hail Mary? No. Why wasn't the Earth spinning in the NASA video they took from their iPhone? Oh, the Earth spins really slowly. It was just slow. How early to think about trying to get a PhD? 15? Well, look, so the thing is, like, you know, you don't even have to know what you want to do when you're 18. But the thing is or when you're 15. But the thing is if you want to get a PhD in physics, the easiest way will be to get a bachelor's degree in physics, right? And getting a bachelor's degree in physics is easiest if your math skills are good. So you will have the easiest time if you already found yourself loving math or practicing math for fun, those kinds of things, as a youngster. Now, that's not to say that it's impossible. I know plenty of people who didn't even know that they were going to go into physics. Like, I have a mutual a friend, Dakota Tyler. He just got his PhD in astrophysics, and he didn't even know, like, he hardly knew anything about physics when he was in college because he was playing football. And then he got an injury, and then he's like, oh, this is so cool. And so then he pivoted. So now he's a little bit older than me, I think, and he just got his PhD. So it's possible. It's just going to be easier if you start younger and you start with a strong math background. Is there a growing body of evidence to show that the universe is older than 13 billion years old? No. Can you I mean, well, the question is, when was the Big Bang? And as far as we can tell, the Big Bang was 13.8-ish billion years old, and I haven't seen new evidence that says otherwise. Now, whether or not the universe is older than the Big Bang, that's a different story. From Based Ashura with the $5, thank you so much. I'm glad to see Dr. Blitz hasn't gone to the Undying Lands at the end of the Third Age. I haven't, indeed. And from Ninja in the first degree with the $2, thus constant braking force on the ring slows it down. Well, it wouldn't necessarily be braking force. So the ring will spin. There will be torques applied in various directions. But Yeah, I mean, I suspect what would happen, you'd have to actually work out what direction the torque is on the gyroscope, but I wouldn't actually be surprised if the gyroscope inevitably just stopped spinning. Or rather, spun in a direction where if it tilted up, right, while it was attached to the gyroscope, then there'd be no change there. But like, consider this just as a thought experiment. Consider that you have a rotating ring that's 10,000 kilograms, and it's and then you attach like a half a gram gyroscope to it to suggest that somehow the half a gram gyroscope is going to cause the spinning ring to eventually stop. Probably wrong, right? So, but we would have to actually work at the details there. From Marple with the $2, do you see any problems in today's higher academia? Yes. The problems are currently, well, okay. I'm going to speculate, but I suspect that from what I've heard, the problems are AI related. Students are using AI to submit homeworks. Professors are grading homeworks with AI. Faculty are submitting grants that were written with AI. Those grants are being reviewed by AI. You know, there's just it's just kind of watering down what academics actually do, which is not good in my view. When's the next KSP session? This Saturday. Should be. Just because, yeah, well, will you discuss your paper on quantum fluctuations? If somebody asks me a question about them, like a physicist means hearing voices and stuff? No. This Blitz dude is lost forever clinging to scientism and beliefs. That's a little confused. Are you currently still working in academia? Sort of. So I make more money doing content creation and doing live streams and doing like the kind of education that I do online than I would working at a university. So currently I'm self-funding. So whereas most faculty, they would probably teach they'd probably spend 4, maybe 5 hours a day on administrative stuff and teaching and grading. I spend that time writing scripts and doing live streams. And then I spend the other part of my day doing research. So sort of in the sense that I'm still going to conferences, I'm still writing papers, but not in the sense that I'm employed by a university, if that makes sense. YouTube is set to members only. Oh, damn. Okay. Sorry, I missed that. Let me fix that really quick. It shouldn't be. 1 sec. I'm so sorry, everybody. I just forgot to change it from last time. I wish that there was a way to like have it be default. 1 sec, y'all. Yeah, you guys will be free. I'm so sorry. We'll close them again for members only at 11, but yeah, definitely not for the first part. Sorry about that. I totally missed that, but good call. And I should have been paying attention to Discord, but I don't usually pay attention to Discord because on this one, because there's no guests. But that's my bad. You're free. If you had to teach a university lecture module, which would you pick, GR or electrodynamics? Maybe GR. But honestly, when I was teaching, when I was a grad student, I really enjoyed teaching intramechanics. That was a delight. But also teaching special relativity, like modern physics classes, which are like special relativity and like introductory quantum mechanics. Those are really fun too. I've just never taught that, so I don't know. How would you explain that everything moves at the same speed in space-time? It's just a normalization. The point is like things have trajectories through space-time. And so we just normalize it so that those trajectories, so there's one fewer variable that describes them. We just set the speed through space-time to 1 or c. You know, usually we use the convention where the speed of light is 1. Why do you think mathematical analysis gives you a clue about metaphysics like there's epsilon delta? Oh, well, I mean, I'm not sure if it does, but I think that at least there's some reason why you might think so. And it's just because mathematics is just like a way of thinking formally about things. We super chat to come up and ask a question? No. Super chats will get your question answered though, but I'm not taking guests right now. I will take guests tomorrow at 10:30 Pacific time. Hypothetically, could gravity get weaker as it approaches the quantum level to prevent infinities? Maybe. We don't know how gravity works at the quantum level, ultimately. Like, we don't have a final answer. I love watching you and Forrest Valkyrie the line the best too. I appreciate that. I like live streaming with Forrest. He's a good guy. Looking to get into research after uni. What fields should I look at working in? Oh, that depends on what you want to do. Would it be possible for aliens to travel to Earth when they are many light years away? Well, I guess they could just go, like, if they just start heading towards Earth, eventually they'll get here. It just might take a long time. Do you use quantum mechanics as an objection to act potency distinction? No. I'm not sure how that would work. I have to think about it some, I guess. Einstein hasn't written anything in ages. True. Einstein, get on the ball. I don't know why the... Oh, no, never mind. Okay, we're good. What happens to light near 0 Kelvin? It keeps going. Light doesn't care about the temperature. Did you know it's mathematically impossible to say rough twice in a row? No, I'm not doing it. Caleb, I'm not doing it, but good bait. That's assuming they do not have some type of quantum drive. You can't put quantum in front of something and make it be science fiction. That's not how it works. Do you think that we should focus more on using nuclear fission energy or making nuclear fusion efficient? We can walk and chew bubble gum at the same time. I don't think that there's an issue with doing both. Would the quantum phone be limiting light speed? Maybe indirectly. There's a vacuum the diameter of the Earth through the core and dropped a ball in it. What happens? Well, it can't be the diameter of the Earth, but if you mean if the Earth was hollow and you dropped a ball, well, so once it's inside the Earth, it wouldn't accelerate anymore at all. Once it's in the vacuum where there's no matter. If warp drives are possible, would they still have a speed limit? No. So Hank Green said that if you fell through a perfect tube through the Earth, that you would stop falling. Eventually you would. You would fall until you got to the other side, and then you would fall, and then eventually you would come to rest in the middle, just because of friction. Tips on making a stronger application for PhDs. The thing is your applications, and I can't say, I haven't been on a application committee, or on I haven't been on one of those committees. But in general, an honest review of an application just involves the stuff that you've done, looking at the stuff that you've done. And so making a stronger application is going to mean having done more. So if you've published more, that's good. Also, letters of recommendation from famous people will always help. I always forget about that one, but that one's important. Blitz, do you use quantum... Oh, never mind, I already answered that. Guess I'm way behind. How do I handle post-traumatic experience? Talk to a therapist? I don't know. Thoughts on magnetic flux? What about it? It's a quantifiable thing in physics. Is math real? Is it real in a platonic sense? I think not. How do atoms know when to decay? They don't. It's a quantum phenomenon, meaning that at least as far as our universe is concerned, it's effectively random. What is the closest understanding we have for quantum entanglement? Well, quantum entanglement is pretty well understood. In that it is a correlation between quantum particles that has no classical explanation, but there is a correlation there. What's the fastest and realistic time frame we could terraform Mars into a habitable planet for humans? Whatever answer I give you, it will be longer than it would take to fix Earth. Can you explain quantum field theory and why particles from different fields interact? Well, why particles from different fields interact? They interact from the gauge fields. The gauge fields, these are the particles like photons and gluons. These mediate the forces, and those mediate the interactions. And the reason that those gauge fields interact with the particles that we think of, like quarks and leptons, is because those gauge fields effectively change the curvature of the space that those objects, that those particles, those other fields are traveling through. So that's why that's why there's a apparent force from these gauge fields. It's because they essentially modify space-time. They add a little bit of extra curvature for these particles in sort of a higher dimensional version of space-time. And those particles are traveling through that higher dimensional version of space-time, and that affects their trajectory. And the way it's affected depends on their charge, of course. I've heard expansion described as space-time expanding. If this is correct, is space-time made of something? No, so it's not space-time expanding, it's space expanding. It's not made of something. So when we talk about space expanding, what we mean is that for any pair of objects in space that are not gravitationally bound together, their distance is growing, and that's for every pair. How to explain higher dimensions to my young learner? Well, the way that I think it's typically done is just by analogy. So you would say, look, if you were actually have your young learner read Flatland by something Abbott or Abbott something. Edwin Abbott. Wait, his name was Edwin Abbott. That's a terrible name. His name was Abbott. That's very... Anyway, it's not a hard story to read, or you could read it to your young learner if they're particularly young. But basically what the book gives is... It's a short story. What the story gives is it gives like an intuition for what it would be like for a two-dimensional being to see or to try to understand a three-dimensional being for the first time. And so by analogy, that can at least help you think about higher dimensions. How's cat? How's wife? Cat is horrible, wife is lovely. Do we know how they have instant communication? They don't. They don't have communication. An astrophysicist who got his PhD after a long career elsewhere is Brian May, guitarist for musical group Queen. So if I remember correctly, he wasn't actually... It wasn't like he was... It wasn't like he wasn't interested in physics at all, and then he was a guitarist, and then he went back to get his PhD. My understanding is that he was a PhD grad student, and then Queen blew up, and so he dropped out. That's my understanding. And then I guess he went back and finished what he was working on. So he was doing the traditional route, as far as I know. My BFF is an astrophysicist and thinks the multiverse hypothesis of quantum mechanics is absurd. I don't think it's absurd. I actually think it's quite plausible. Do you think string theory will ever be proven? If it's true, perhaps. If it's not true, certainly not. What's the problem with the theory of quantum gravity? There's a lot of problems, but one of the biggest problems is, well, there's a technical problem, which I think is worthwhile bringing up because there's a whole bunch of conceptual problems too. But the technical problem is the way that we did quantum mechanics historically, or quantum field theory rather, is you take a classical theory like electromagnetism, and then there's a certain procedure that you do to it to turn it into a quantum theory. And then there's some extra steps that you do called renormalization that you then apply to your new to your kind of first version, your dumb version of your quantum field theory, to make it agree with experiment, to make it make sense. And basically there's a whole story there, but I'm not gonna go into it. And so this is like a pretty procedural and algorithmic thing. It's complicated, but we know how to do it for classical field theories. The trouble is when you try to apply this procedure to the classical theory that is general relativity, which is our theory of gravity, it fails. It fails remarkably in basically every way. And in fact, the implication being is that in some sense, there's probably no way to do a quantum field theory for gravity. Maybe if you're extra clever, you can do loop quantum gravity, which is sort of a quantum field theory for gravity, but that's a little bit contentious. Now, there are conceptual issues that we haven't overcome yet. Like, the way that we typically think of quantum mechanics is you think of there's a static background that tells you how time flows, it tells you how tells you the shape of space, and then the quantum field theory is living on top of that. But the way that we understand gravity is the space-time itself. So how do you talk about how time flows when time is part of the thing that you're trying to describe? So there's a lot of issues, but that's just two of them. I know there's no time vector in the Brockhet vector in quantum mechanics, meaning you can't tell past and future apart on that level, yet neutrons decay, which has a clear direction in time. Yeah, so that's another question. Why is there a direction to time? What is this is a question about the arrow of time. My guess is that it's entropic, namely that the direction that things move in are the things that are, you go from less likely states to more likely states, and that's the direction time flows in. Do you believe in the B theory of time? Yeah, that seems most likely. As long as we're staying on the classical level, of course. Are there any limitations on how your brain could represent all the photons hitting your eye? I don't know. Ask a neurologist. How easily you solve differential equation right now? It depends on the differential equation. Dr. Blitz, don't you see that starting from classical theory and then quantize is wrong? Some people think that, yeah. So like that's what string theory is like. Oh, well, maybe we don't start from classical theory and then quantize. Why was QCD so much harder to figure out than the rest of the standard model? Arguably it wasn't. QCD is probably the cleanest. It's just that the dynamics of QCD are really, really hard to model. The actual equations for QCD, like the classical QCD stuff, is fairly straightforward. In fact, I would argue that like electroweak symmetry breaking was probably a more sophisticated thing than QCD. That said, QCD is harder to get predictions out of just because the mathematics is just because the structures are messier. The nonlinearity is okay. The nonlinearity isn't really the problem though. Like quantum chromodynamics, SU3 gauge theories, those are also nonlinear as well. But we can quantize those. The specific type of nonlinearity in GR is a problem, but it's not the only problem. Yeah, you can do effective field theory for gravity, no problem. But that's effective field theory. It's not like it's not like a consistent renormalized theory of quantum gravity, right? How do you view growing block models? It seems like it's kind of trying to get the best of both worlds, but I'm not convinced that that we should treat an asymmetry between the past and the future. Do you know anything about the Schwinger-Dyson equations? I made a video about them a long time ago. Let's see. Oh no, I didn't make a video about the Schwinger-Dyson equations. I made them about the... There's another thing that had Schwinger's name on it. Oh, I made a video about the Schwinger effect. The Schwinger effect? Is that what it's called? Yeah, I made a video about the Schwinger effect, not the Schwinger-Dyson equations. I don't know much about those, no. Can you talk a little about the concept of the God particle? What is that? You shouldn't call it the God particle. It is called the Higgs boson, named after a person. And it is a fundamental particle, and that it is a particle that, through its interactions with other particles, gives those other particles mass. Is naturalness still a legit guide? I think so. What do you know about radiation oncology? Probably a little bit more than the average person, but not a lot. Is this all you do with your life? No. I spend about half my workday doing physics research. The other half I spend doing education and debate stuff. You have any work in K-theory? No, I don't. What do you do for a living? I make YouTube videos. I don't make YouTube videos. So I kind of have three modes. I do science education content. I do kind of debunking, debating kind of style of content, and I do research. Do you know Arthur Young? I don't know who Arthur Young is. No, never heard of him. What are your thoughts on the lithium problem? Do you think it's just a math issue, or are we missing something? I've thought about this a little bit. I had an idea that I hoped would solve it, but it didn't work, so I abandoned the idea. I don't know. I think it might be a lambda CDM issue, actually. Why does the Higgs need so much insane LHC stuff to show up if it's fundamental to all? Because it's heavy. That's why. How do you mathematically describe decay on the quantum level without a time vector? If entropic processes affect the quantum level, wouldn't that just have... So the point is so in standard quantum mechanics and in quantum field theory, you have a time vector. That's given to you. The question is where does that time vector come from? Is an uneducated person inferior to an educated person conducting a social experiment with scientists? I have a feeling it's not a real experiment, but I generally think not. I think that humans are generally valuable regardless of their education level. But if you're asking whether they're inferior as far as education is concerned, then yeah, kind of trivially. If you're asking if they're inferior as far as intelligence is concerned, then there's a correlation there. But I don't think that we can make like a definitive statement that like an uneducated person has inferior intelligence to an educated person, because that's not strictly true. So make that what you do. Should I be worried that I didn't get into any summer research school before graduating? I think it depends. Does your public outreach stuff affect your chances at tenure? Well, I don't work at a university, so I'm not too worried about it. I mean, it might, but currently I get paid better than I would at a university anyway by doing this. So I'm happy to do this kind of stuff. And if this ever does become like an official thing, like if the university wants to hire me to be like their official whatever, like I'd be down with that, but I'm not, you know, I'm not seeking that out. I was doing research without being a part of a university, as I want to continue publishing, but where's the rest of the chat? Where's the rest? Okay, I don't know what the rest of the question is, but I'll just answer it. It's a little bit trickier. It's just the environment that you're in. Like you're a little bit more out of the loop, but with, you know, as long as you have established collaborators who can keep you in the loop, who you talk to on the regular, I don't think it's and assuming that your research doesn't require a lot of funding, then I don't think that it's particularly difficult. That said, you do need a source of income, and unless your source of income is either A, related to your research, or B, is enough that you can only spend a few hours a day generating income and then the rest of your day doing research, then you're going to be really burnt out trying to do research after working for 9 hours, 8 or 9 hours on whatever your day job is. Is conformal cyclic cosmology any more plausible given new data on dark energy? Not really, no. At least not as far as I know. Just gonna... One sec. So, just gonna chill for myself for a minute. So, if you guys like these live streams, this is the kind of I do this kind of live stream twice a day or twice a week, for a few hours each day. If you like that, there are a few ways that you can support me. Probably the easiest way would just be becoming a member on YouTube, like $4 or $5 a month, depending on which channel you subscribe to. Or you could become a patron on Patreon. That's also, you know, a convenient way to support me if you like these kinds of live streams. I do get data on when people choose to subscribe, when people choose to become members, rather. And so if I see more people becoming members during certain kinds of live streams, that's an incentive for me, right? But of course, there are other ways. You can just follow on TikTok, subscribe on YouTube. These are ways to let me know that you guys care. And if for some reason you have excessive amounts of money, you can send super chats. There's Cash App. There's, you know, all these various ways that you can feed me funds. And you can see them at the bottom of my webpage on the internet, which you should check out, by the way. Go check out my website. It's blitz.phd. There's no .com anywhere. Just blitz.phd. Go there, check it out. You can see the research that I do. You can see my outreach stuff. It's a neat place. Anyway, back to the questions. Has magnetism ever been recorded without the electrical component? Well, magnetism and electricity are intrinsically tied to each other. What was my thesis on? It was on conformal hypersurface geometry. In particular, it was on developing tractor calculus for like kind of the tractor equivalent of the Gauss equations for a conformally embedded hypersurface. I was also developing something called conformal fundamental forms, which characterize Poincare-Einstein manifolds. How about get a real job? Be productive, citizen, instead of wasting time. Oh, this is productive. It's called teaching. And to an extent, entertaining. 2022 Nobel Prize given for violating the Bell inequality. What does nothing is locally real practically imply? Practically, it implies nothing. Metaphysically, what it implies is that our universe is fundamentally quantum. Is there another physicist you would like to debate, and what would you debate on? No, not really. How does time not exist in a black hole? I just can't. Time does exist in a black hole. Whoever said otherwise is wrong. How do you feel about AI taking over? I don't love it. I mean, I use it. I use it for my, I use it, so I think it's a useful tool, but I think that people are, I think we're losing a lot of the human touch in a lot of things. Are there laws of nature, or is randomness constantly rolling an orderly jackpot? I don't think that there are laws of nature that are governing. I think that our universe is a certain way, and the laws of nature are the things that describe it. Explain how a rocket pushes off itself in space. It doesn't push off itself. The rocket, so there's like the metallic solid structure of the rocket, and then that releases gas or liquid into a combustion chamber, which is no longer attached to the rocket. It's no longer like stuck in place in the rocket. That combustion chamber then causes the fuel and the oxygen to combust, creating an explosion, which pushes the rocket forward. Keeping in mind that the combusting gas, the combusting fuel, is not part of the rocket, right? Do you use MapleSoft? I do, yeah. I just call it Maple, but yes. What school do you go to? I'm not a student. I saw the video about quantum curvature fluctuations. Do you know how this affects vacuum states? No, nobody does. Do you suggest getting a master's or PhD if I don't want to go into research? A master's will take you further and take less time if you don't want to go into research. Any thoughts on why we don't see monopoles? If they were created, could it just be that they're just, could it be that they're not stable? Well, they should be stable if if monopoles exist, right? Because the magnetic charge would be conserved. Speculatively, if they exist, maybe they're just really, really rare. There could just be one in the observable universe. Why does the number of Kuiper Bell objects fall off rapidly and unexpectedly beyond a distance of 50 AUs? I don't know. I didn't even know that that was the case. Do you think a multiverse of parallel universes is likely, the many worlds interpretation? I think it's possible. Do you find visualizing manifolds and other geometric surfaces spaces comes more easily to you? Not really, no. Difference between physicist and astrophysicist? An astrophysicist is just a kind of physicist. But it requires sufficient specialization that we kind of call it its own thing. They work more closely with astronomers. Do the field equations prediction of white holes give us reason to believe in them? Not really, no. Because the field equations predict a lot of things that are unphysical. How is there time inside of a black hole? Because the interior of a black hole is a four-dimensional Lorentzian manifold. I know that it doesn't help, but I don't know why you think that there's no time inside of a black hole. Have you talked with Flat Earth Dave? I think so. I think once. What is the lithium problem you mentioned earlier? Yeah, so if you take standard Big Bang cosmology, which is called lambda CDM, that model makes certain predictions about the density or the amount of certain elements that exist in the universe. So it makes a prediction that like 75% of the universe's baryonic matter will be hydrogen, like 24% will be helium, and then like half a percent or something, and the remaining 1% is just higher elements. And the thing is we should expect some degree of lithium, like a small amount of lithium, but instead what we observe is like, I think we observe like twice as much lithium as the model predicts, or maybe it's half as much, I don't remember which way. But so this is like a genuine failure mode prediction. But it's also really finicky. Thank you for the meteor shower, the philosopher. I appreciate that. It's really finicky because what we're talking about is like, we're talking about an expanding universe cosmology coupled with relativistic fluid mechanics, coupled with nuclear fit. Like, it's just a very, very complicated system. So it's possible that we're just making bad predictions, but it's possible that that lambda CDM has like a fundamental flaw at some kind of subtle level. Lambda CDM being the standard model of cosmology. It's what we call the Big Bang. What are your thoughts on our universe being inside a black hole? I don't think it's true. I don't think that we have a good reason to think it's true either. I appreciate that, philosopher. It's 1/3. Okay. Has anything come out of your collaboration on quantum gravity? I mean, we published a paper on it. I haven't worked with Sean again in the last since we finished that paper. I've emailed him and we were working on something, but it kind of petered out. And then I had these health issues. I might reach out to him again this summer if I run out of things to work on, but currently I have a lot of projects going on, so I probably won't. And I don't have any new ideas to give him either. He's the guy who runs the like he's one of the people, he's one of the two people who literally wrote the book on quantum Riemannian geometry, so he understands that stuff way better than I do. So in order for me to produce a valuable contribution to collaborate with him, I need to come up with basically the idea, like the physics idea that he's going to use his machinery to help compute. And as it stands right now, I don't really have one. At least not something that would be helpful for him or interesting for him. Does it only fail at predicting lithium amounts? As far as I know, yeah. Yeah. Could dark matter be regarded as the cumulative effect of gravity, seeing as gravity is infinite? Not really. Because the problem is that if you have gravity, if you have matter around you, that's not going to affect the gravity on the inside. not going to affect the gravity that you feel. The gravity will be pulling on you in basically all directions equally. And we see that there is some anomalous gravitational acceleration, say or anomalous gravitational pull, say in the spin rates of galaxies. Can we renormalize GR if we Wick rotate to a Euclidean signature, renormalize, then rotate back? I don't think so, no. Do people use ChatGPT to do physics? I don't know. I mean, I use it sometimes as like a sounding board. Like I'll have an idea, I'll be like, hey, does this idea work? And it'll be like, this idea could work, or this idea won't work. So like it's useful as like a sounding board, but to like do physics proper, I'm not so sure. I don't know if it's able to do physics on its own. Lambda CDM is on its way out thanks to DESI results, right? But it's contentious. It's not clear whether or not like DESI is still, the DESI data is, unfortunately, I wish that it was more definitive, but it's still kind of teetering on the edge, right? Do you think we can utilize dark matter in some ways useful someday? Probably not, no, because it's not the kind of thing that you can control electromagnetically. And that's the easiest thing that we can control. The observable universe's Schwarzschild radius is larger than the observable universe itself. Yes, but the Schwarzschild radius doesn't, if a thing is smaller than a Schwarzschild radius, it doesn't tell you anything about whether or not a black hole will form. Black hole will only form if a thing is smaller than its Schwarzschild radius and there's nothing around it, right? Is there maybe no such thing as a cosmological constant? I lean that way. Or if there is a cosmological constant, then it can't. Then I don't think it's positive. I'm just pointing out what an awful Nightbot is. Okay, what's wrong with Nightbot? And if you have complaints, like specific complaints about Nightbot, and you want to help improve, go to the Discord server and make suggestions for the Nightbot, because I'd love for things to get better. If the universe wasn't expanding, would we still reach a heat death type scenario? No, because then it would crunch. From Chukwu with the $5. Thank you for the super chat, by the way. Can humans ever have a fundamental understanding of quantum mechanics and the nature of reality, or will our understanding always be limited by our nervous system? That's a good question that nobody knows the answer to. It depends on what the final answer is, I guess. Is it possible that that enough gravity could concentrate and pull all of space-time in on itself? Yeah, it's called the Big Crunch. But we don't know if that's going to happen yet. Do you use Claude? No. I used Claude to design my website, but it was really annoying to work with. If wave functions never collapse, why do observers experience definite realities? That's a good question. Depends on your preferred interpretation of quantum mechanics, but if you're taking the many worlds interpretation, it's because the observers themselves enter superposition. Gonna jump down to the bottom so I don't miss anything. What is the Big Crunch? The universe crunches in on itself. Heat death before the Big Crunch? No, you can't have both. James Webb Telescope revealed massive ancient galaxies near the Big Bang Center. Well, there isn't a Big Bang Center, so you're already confused. They're also not older than the Big Bang. Do you accept it? Age of the universe can be completely wrong? I mean, it could be, but the James Webb isn't telling us that it is. Did a Big Crunch precede the Our Big Bang? We don't know, maybe. I have an idea. I have an idea that kind of involves that, but, you know, who's to say? Have you been using AI in your work, like for crunching algebra? No, I just use Maple for doing algebra. Maple's deterministic, which is more likely to, or less likely to screw up. You can't have both. Well, if you have a heat death, then that means that the universe eventually reaches like a large empty state, and it's still expanding. But if you have a crunch, then that means that it collapses. So you can't have both. From Iron Raven with the $5, have been watching your content for a couple weeks. Love your amount of knowledge and your quick wit. Keep up the awesome work. Well, I appreciate that. That's very, very sweet. You think you're way smarter than everybody, but you're not? I mean, look, I'm not sure if intelligence is like something that can be well quantified. But what is the case is I know a lot more about physics than basically everybody on the planet, with the exception of other physicists, right? So that's true. I also am pretty good at solving problems, as demonstrated by the fact that I was able to solve problems, particularly complicated problems. So make of that what you will. Would a big crunch ring the Taco Bell? Probably not. Were your parents physicists? Nope. My mother is a physician. My father was a builder. That's probably the right word. He wasn't an architect. He helped run a construction company. He had an engineering degree. Yeah. He wasn't the person building the house, but he was the person kind of directing the building of the house, if that makes sense. Is a white hole truly an inverted black hole? Kind of by definition. Yeah, how's your cancer going? Don't have cancer, it turns out. Go watch the update video, it's from a few weeks ago. Actually, it's from over a month ago now. I saw an article stating dark energy causing the expansion is slowing down. Is that true? It's possible. It's at least more of a possibility now than it was 5 years ago. Are you going to take guests? Potentially, or not today. Tomorrow I will. If you were so smart at physics, you would know the Earth is flat. Oh, that's a good meme. Would you rather fight 100 duck-sized horses or 1 horse-sized duck? Definitely 100 duck-sized horses. Although a horse-sized duck probably wouldn't be able to stand. So, hypothetically, if the universe was neither expanding or contracting, would that stasis be detrimental to life, or would everything go on as normal? It would be fine for life. It would actually probably be beneficial for life, because it gives life more time to do its thing. However, there is no such stable configuration, right? Do you think we'll ever get a guaranteed answer of what caused the Big Bang? Possibly. I think that that's a possibility. You gonna bring back the paper reading? Maybe. I think it really depends on contractor. No, not contractor. So his father ran a construction company. He owned a construction company. And in some sense, he was kind of running the thing. At least up until he got sick. He did maybe a foreman. Foreman would be like that's true. He did design the house that he and my mom lived in for a few years. That's true too. He wasn't a carpenter. Foreman was maybe the right word. Supervisor, yeah, something like that. Overseer maybe. Project manager, that's probably right. How hard would it be to arm a cat with a portable laser it could aim and fire? Not hard, but don't do it. Hi, are you a physicist? Thank you for the answer. Yes. There's no stable configuration. Is all life basically destined to end? Well, yeah, generally. Are you an empiricist? Not really, no. Are black holes closer to a field phenomenon than an object? That seems like a subjective evaluation. I would say probably not. Does anyone know anyone who works for Space Force? No, I don't. If a white hole is proven, would it help the belief that black holes could lead to parallel dimensions? No, not really. How do self-replicating molecules defy entropy? They don't really. Has thermodynamics ever been applied to black holes? And if yes, what would be the entropy of a black hole? Negative entropy? It has been. In fact, there's a whole set of laws called black hole or a whole set of kind of a subfield of relativity. It's called black hole thermodynamics. And no, they have positive entropy. They have a ton of entropy, like so much entropy. Hypothetically, if humanity survives until the sun is about to die, what do you think the likelihood of us being technologically capable of leaving our solar system en masse? I think that if we live that long, we will already be out of the solar system before the sun dies. Do you think life is a lot rarer than the common consensus? I don't think it's that rare. Why does your stream make me so calm and I have no interest in physics? I don't know, maybe it's just my voice. My voice soothing? How do quantum fluctuations prove that something can exist out of nothing? They don't. They don't, and it doesn't. What's your go-to book in thermodynamics? I don't have one because I hated thermodynamics when I was in college. I hated it so much. It's so bad. Such a hard topic to teach well. If the laws of physics are prescriptions, then what the heck do doctors of physics write? True. What do you think of WIMPs? Do you have a pet DM hypothesis? No, I'm pretty agnostic on it. It's not my area. It's not something I've worked in, so I don't have a bias here. It'd be neat if it was primordial black holes, because then I would have more to say on them. But WIMPs seem at least plausible. If you could choose, would you rather solve dark matter or quantum gravity? Quantum gravity 100 times over. The colorful mic is missing. It's just out of the frame. Come on, go away. There we go. How much extra have you studied in order to know so many theoretical things? I have very broad knowledge on these kinds of things because the science communication that I do. But I don't think I've studied more than other people, more than other scientists in my field. From Geraint with the $5, could a black hole get stuck at the Planck scale due to the Hawking radiation exceeding the Planck wavelength, preventing it from fully decaying? The Hawking radiation, you mean the Hawking radiation getting smaller than the Planck wavelength? Well, look, so questions about what goes on in the last moments of a black hole as it's evaporating, questions about what happens to say the light that it emits as its frequency goes up and surpasses the Planck length. These are all questions that require a full theory of quantum gravity to understand. So I got nothing for you there. If spacetime emerges from quantum information, what fundamentally stores that information? I don't think that spacetime emerges from quantum information. I think that spacetime is an emergent phenomena from correlations between quantum objects, or from the way that quantum objects interact with each other, I should say. Do you think string theory is correct? I kind of lean towards no, but I'd like it to be correct. What does that illustration behind you represent? Well, it depends on where you're watching, I guess. I don't know if you're watching on YouTube or on TikTok, but or which YouTube stream you're watching on, but there's a black hole behind me on YouTube. It's a black hole, like a simulation of a black hole. And there's also this diagram, which is representing electron-electron repulsion with a one-loop diagram. What are your suspicions about the reality of other diagrams predicted by Penrose diagrams? I don't think that they're real. Why did they used to doubt black hole existence, and how is that different from the doubt about white holes? Well, it's not that people really doubted black holes' existence, it's just that it wasn't clear. So going back as far as like the 50s and 60s, we had good ideas as to how black holes could form. The question is just, were the conditions ever right in our universe to allow that to happen? To allow for like those conditions to be satisfied? But white holes, so like we had a good idea as to what black holes would be like in the real world. We just didn't know if they existed. The thing about white holes is that, black holes, we had a good idea about how black holes would exist in the real world. We just didn't know if they existed. The thing about white holes is that we don't have any idea as to what they would even be like, how they would even form, right? Like the idea is very, very different. When the values of the metric tensor given by the Einstein field equations are singular, do these solutions represent a singularity? Not necessarily. It could be a coordinate singularity, like what we see in the Schwarzschild metric. How do you get into physics? You go to a university and study. Is there any experimentation you'd like to see based off your own research? There's a paper I'm working on now which might have some observational implications, but not really. Most of the stuff I've done is pretty formal. Who do you think is the single most influential physicist in quantum mechanics? Max Planck, perhaps? Erwin Schrödinger, perhaps? Perhaps Albert Einstein, in fact. Hard to say. While you were studying, how did you retain everything from previous semesters? I don't know, I just did. Maybe I studied well. Why do all physicists like to grow their hair? I don't know. If you could meet any physicist, dead or alive, who'd you meet? Albert Einstein. Easy peasy. God, my stomach is very rumbly today. Does all matter that falls into a black hole get shot back out of the poles? No. In fact, as far as we can tell, nothing gets shot out, except perhaps Hawking radiation. If curvature is fundamental, what does it fluctuate? Why does it fluctuate quantum mechanically? Well, that's the question. We don't know if curvature is fundamental. Oh. What's flawed about quantum physics? As far as we can tell, nothing. As far as we can tell, there are no predictions of quantum physics that are wrong. Or that fail to accurately reproduce our world. Could magically solve one mystery of physics, what would it be? It'd be the problem of quantum gravity. We don't know how gravity behaves quantum mechanically. If you could travel back in time as an observer, where and when would you go and why? I would go to the Solvay conference of 1926. The visible light is packed as photons, but is that true for gamma rays and radio waves? Yeah. All electromagnetic waves can be described as photons. Do black holes ever expel matter? With the exception of Hawking radiation, not from within their event horizon. What does it mean to have a PhD in mathematical physics? You just research in topics that a lot of math. So mathematical physics is like sort of a blending of mathematics and physics, as the name implies. My PhD just says physics on it. The area of physics that I do is mathematical physics. So I'm interested in doing like mathematical constructions, mathematical proofs, for things with relevance to certain branches of physics. I'm a physics teacher, but I'm curious how you got into science communication. Any advice going down that route? I basically just picked up TikTok right before I ended my PhD, right before I finished it. You encouraged me to download it so I could watch the videos that you sent me. I'm pretty sure that... No. Are we talking about the first video that I made? With like the laser stuff? Well, that I believe. Yeah. Guys, my wife is so supportive. Who wins at chess? You or Mrs. Blitz? I actually... Oh, I don't... Have you ever played chess? Because I'm not good at chess. But like... I'd probably win just because I probably played more than you, but I'm really not good. Aaron would beat both of us. What does physics tell us about death and beyond? I don't think it does. How would you view JWST evidence of galaxies that are too dense to form too early? Well, I think that would tell us that we need to reevaluate our theories of galaxy formation. She is always right, and she is so pretty. I know. She's the best. Why do people say energy cannot be created or destroyed? Because at least as far as experimentation on Earth is concerned, it's true. It's called the conservation of energy. How did we meet? Oh, we lived on the same floor in undergrad. And we just ran into each other a lot, and I was annoying to her, so... what's your elo on chess.com? Probably like 5. I'm not good. Will there ever be a grand unifying theory? Will physics end once the standard model is completed? Well, it won't be the standard model. Probably not. But grand unifying theories are kind of falling out of favor because the predictions that they've made have not been so great. From Tom and Ginge with the £5, I'm sorry. Why does length contraction happen when things are moving in your reference frame? Trying to understand how back EMF works fundamentally. Why does length contraction happen? Well, length contraction is a feature of special relativity. So, wait, are you asking when things are moving in your reference frame? So those things will appear to be shorter in some sense. because they're moving relative to you. The reason why it happens is essentially because the laws of physics have to be invariant regardless of your inertial reference frame, and the speed of light is one such law of physics. And you can derive length contraction from the invariance of the speed of light. Now, as to why the speed of light is invariant, because we live in a Lorentzian four-dimensional manifold, like, these questions about why are a little bit tricky to answer with physics. Oh. What is the correct formula to avoid? No, I'm not going to answer that. I think that what he's trying to understand how, like, what is there's a really, really annoying, complicated equation that you learn when you take Jackson E&M. And there are relativistic effects that are involved there. And so I could imagine that maybe that's what he's referring to. Is there a universal standard now, or is everything subjective or relative? There's not a universal standard now. Relativity gets us to that conclusion. What's the mechanism by which the Higgs field particle gives matter mass? So the idea is merely that play me in chess. No, the idea is merely that the Higgs field has a vacuum expectation value. It's not like its rest value when the Higgs field is not excited. Its rest value isn't 0. And so because the Higgs field couples, it interacts with all of these other particles, these other fields, matter particles, if you will. Even when the Higgs field is completely non-excited, there's still a term that contributes via this interaction. And that term looks exactly like a mass term would look. Quadratic term in the fields. And that's what a mass is. And so you get the VEV there. Vacuum expectation value, VEV. Is he even reading the live TikTok messages? Yeah. There's just messages from 4 different platforms. You'll have to forgive me, I'm sorry. Is your wife a physicist as well? No, she's a lawyer. She's also really smart. Which Planck unit is fundamental? Length, mass, time? Arguably they all are. If there's no universal now, how do we reconcile that with our perception of time? That it's an illusion. What are your thoughts on Gödel's spinning universe? It's very, very weird. Our universe doesn't seem to be spinning, at least not very much. But if it were, then there'd be a lot of weird things happening as far as causality is concerned. Does your wife have a YouTube TikTok channel too? She does not. I've told her that she should make one because she's probably more entertaining than I am, but she's shy. Would you prefer hydrogen vehicles over lithium EVs? I don't know. Hydrogen tends to explode. Assuming that the universe is infinite and that there are primordial black holes, would you like some toast? Yes, I would. My stomach is rumbly. You could do Ask a Lawyer. I don't think that she's too shy. How much math do you do on a daily basis at work? It depends on the day. Sometimes I do more physicsy stuff where I'm really trying to work out the details of a model, whereas sometimes I'm trying to like prove something, in which case I'm doing math. Are you an atheist? Yes. What's the ontology of an electron without describing what it does? I think a thing is what it does. I don't think that there's anything to say about a thing, about what a thing is, aside from the features that it has. And the features that it has describe what it does. I'm in high school and I actually love physics, but my teacher is horrible. How do I not crash out? Go watch PBS Spacetime on YouTube. First time here, thank you for having me. What are your thoughts on the scientists that are gone? Scientists die sometimes. Especially over 5 years. 4 scientists-ish that have died, and some of them mysteriously, is not that surprising. Let's see. You ever dream about physics and equations? Very, very rarely. Why is iron the most stable element? It's actually technically both iron and nickel, but it's because they have just the right amount of protons and neutrons that the strong force is sufficiently strong to hold it together, and the electromagnetic force is still not strong enough to try to drive it apart. That's basically it. Also, there's some stuff about magic numbers in the nucleus, a little bit more complicated than that, but that's one way to think about it. From Cat's Rule with the $10, I've asked people before, but still trying to understand it. Why is the universe measured flat? I want to understand it better. Thank you for all you do. So, I don't know if you're asking why, as in like, why is it this way rather than that way, but the, what we mean when we say flat is that if you took out all of the matter, took out all of the energy, the universe would be flat. It would have, or rather, how do I want to phrase this? Yeah, if you took out all the matter, took out all the energy, and then you took a slice of space-time, there would be no curvature. It could be. You can imagine that a slice of space-time is shaped like a higher dimensional version of a sphere, in which case there would be curvature, even if you took out all of the matter and all of the energy. But it looks like for our universe, it's either actually flat in the sense that I just described, or if it is curved, it's curved like the surface of the Earth is curved, in that it's so big it's hard to see. The cosmological constant was even slightly different. Would that mean galaxies can form? Not really, but it depends on how you quantify slightly different. Where should the 9th planet lie in relation to AU? I don't know. I don't even know if there is a 9th planet. Have you made any contributions to the field of math or physics? Yeah, I published like more than a dozen papers. What does your typical workday look like? Does it vary very much day to day? So my typical workday looks something like sometime in the evening the previous night, I'll work on a script, write up a script, and then I'll record it, typically right before bed. Then in the morning, I usually edit a video and post the video, an educational video, sometimes a debunking video. I usually do this between 6:30 and 8. Today was a little bit late. Then from 9 until about noon, I live stream. So sometimes I'm doing this, sometimes I'm doing debate stuff. And then from noon until 5-ish, well, I'll eat lunch at some point in between, but from noon until 5-ish, I pick a research problem for the day and I work on that problem. Today, I have a problem that I'm working on because I have a meeting about this research problem tomorrow, and I procrastinated working on it because I've been working on another thing that I find a little bit more brain tickling. But I have to work on this project today, otherwise I won't have anything for the meeting tomorrow. From Garain with the $5, you said earlier that quantum mechanics was never wrong, but isn't the vacuum energy prediction off by many orders of magnitude? No, not really, as long as you don't interpret it incorrectly. So there was this idea, this kind of hope, that the vacuum energy that we compute in quantum mechanics might be related to the cosmological constant. Maybe it is the cosmological constant. But then we did the calculation and the numbers are different. And by the way, the calculations are not well controlled, so like it's not clear that that those calculations are even correct. But even if we trust those calculations, there's no guarantee that that's related to the cosmological constant, right? And from Smitshaw with the $5, why would Rocky and Project Hail Mary be able to be unable to withstand Earth's atmosphere? Isn't xenon inert and he's made of xenonite? I don't think he's made of xenonite, but I think he breathes ammonia. I'm not a chemist and I also didn't read the book, so I don't think he's made of xenonite. I think xenonite is just like a tool that, or like a material that they use for construction. Does it even make sense to talk about space-time without mass or energy? I mean, in the context of GR, sure, yeah, absolutely, you can do that. Now, philosophically, maybe not, but... What's up with the religious argument lives you do? Is it just like low-hanging fruit? Well, I think it's an interesting conversation to have. And I also think that it's probably... I think that generally speaking, like, there's kind of two branches here, right? There's the philosophical arguments, which I think are interesting to have. I think that these are deep questions that we should think about. And then there's the people who come on that are biblical literalists who, think a flood happened and that the Earth is only 6,000 years old. And I think that that's dangerous. And I think that, we should do our best to fight against that kind of, misinformation. Do you think that Bob Lazar just got lucky when he predicted the stabilization of element 115? Element 115 is wildly unstable. So no, he didn't get lucky. He was just wrong. From David's Orbit Science with the $5, can distance be an effect of correlation on the quantum level? And is time just a description of change between objects in space? For the former, plausibly. For the latter, that's a hard question. This whole business about space being emergent is exactly what you're talking about, that it might be a result of the correlation arising from entanglement. Another TikTok scientist, give me Brian Cox any day. I have a PhD just like Brian Cox does. In fact, actually, I'm curious when the last time Brian Cox published. Because I know he still teaches at the well, I know he still works at the University of Manchester, but I'm curious. So his last publication was 7 years ago, and it was like in the Atlas collaboration. Like, it wasn't like a paper that he wrote himself. I think. Let me see. He only has 10 publications? No way. No way. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Okay, hold on. That's also wrong. He also doesn't have 1,200 publications. That would be impossible. So now I'm a little confused. I don't think that that's him. Yeah, now I'm a little confused. I'm not clear. It's not clear how many publications he has. Yeah, I don't know, but I actually might have more publications than him. So make of that what you will. I don't know though. I don't know how many publications he has. They seem like they're hard to find, whereas mine are pretty easy to find because I have them on my website. Actually, maybe we go to Brian Cox's website. I'm curious now. He's got to have a website, right? Okay, maybe we just go to. Okay, this is a waste of time. But anyway, why do you guys believe the Earth and Venus are spinning in the opposite? Well, they are. They are spinning. You can see what direction they're spinning in. Getting a double bachelor's, applied mathematics and astronomy. How do I not lose my mind? Well, if you're losing your mind, then is it because like why? It depends on why you're losing your mind, I guess. If you're losing your mind because it's a lot of work, well, you knew this going in. If you're losing your mind because it's boring, then you should do a different subject. I have more publications than both of you if you include TikTok comments. Ah, true. What is something that you find curious and would like to have solved, proved, or made headway in our time? Quantum gravity. I'd like to know how that works. If I want to start a career in astrophysics, what A levels should I take? Probably physics and math, if there is such a thing. From Kango with the 5 New Zealand dollars. Yes, but were you in D-Ream Rocking 90s pop band? And I was not. That's true. Absolutely, you're right. You're right. You got me. What's the most you've studied for a test? I did not study for tests in any substantial amount. Which is, I probably should have studied more, but I definitely didn't. If omega is less than 1, then there is negative curvature suggesting an open established state of the universe. Yes, that's true. Dude, we are definitely not spinning right now. Your person is capable of detecting motion. Trust the science, bro. Oh, well, your person is not capable of detecting the spinning of the Earth because our sense organs that we use to detect motion are just not that sensitive. Can turbulence be solved fundamentally? That's the question, isn't it? That's what the Navier-Stokes is about. Well, that's not all the Navier-Stokes equation is about, but the Navier-Stokes equation captures turbulence, and so that's a question that we don't know the answer to. Do you think the concept of mathematics can explain things outside the universe? I don't know if there is a thing outside the universe. How can space-time be emergent in an infinite universe? Is it only bound to finite models? No, I mean, look, the whole point is that the universe wouldn't be infinite fundamentally. It would just be the infinite nature of the universe would just be emergent from an underlying quantum phenomenon. Any advice for someone going into nuclear engineering? No, because I don't know stuff about nuclear engineering. Why isn't the wind consistent with the spin of the Earth? It is, on average. Do you think AI and tech is stealing talent from theoretical physics? Yeah, probably. Does Neil deGrasse Tyson embarrass real physicists? Not me, but maybe other people. Could you prove there's infinitely many twin primes real quick? I'd love to. So I can officially call you Dr. Blitz now? You've been able to call me Dr. Blitz forever. What? Why does gravity affect time? That's a great question. The thing about why questions is that physics doesn't answer why, it just answers how. Is being a physicist make good money? You don't go into this for the money. Who's the most cringe science communicator? Cringe. It's gotta be me. Why are there not more Sean Carrolls, and how do we solve this? Well, there are, if you believe Sean Carroll, there are possibly infinitely many Sean Carrolls. We can detect subtle movements. When you're in an elevator, you know when the elevator is at standstill and when the elevator is moving up or down if you're really paying attention. Yes, you can. That's far larger than the effect that you would feel from the rotation of the Earth. What's the most interesting concept in physics for me? It's just got to be all of the interesting things that can happen and unintuitive things that can happen if you use the Einstein field equations to describe gravity. You could get an answer to any question about the universe we have, what would it be? How gravity exists at the quantum scale? If emergent spacetime is correlation between quantum states, how would it emerge in space beyond matter? There isn't space beyond matter. Oh, most cringe science communicator is black chemist. He doesn't even get the name of science communicator. What do you think of Lawrence Krauss? I only know the allegations, but I knew somebody who worked for him, and she didn't have good things to say. What did you think of Project Hail Mary? I thought it was a great movie. Loved it. Should we accept conservation laws as truth or only as necessary premise for finding utility? They are derivable mathematically. Oh. Can we land in the sun during winter? No. Sun's still hot. What happened to my nose? I had surgery and then they had to tape something to my nose and then they ripped off some skin from my nose. What do you think about all the missing scientists? Well, like, you mean like all 4 of them? I think that scientists die sometimes. Sometimes, even in mysterious ways. Have you seen the silhouetted Earth photos made into time-lapse movie showing reflections of satellites? I haven't, but that seems cool. What does Poincare-Einstein manifolds mean in your paper? A Poincare-Einstein is a specific kind of Riemannian manifold. In particular, it is a conformally compact manifold, meaning that it doesn't have a boundary, but if you change the metric, you can bring a boundary in from infinity. And then you can kind of close off the manifold, so that it does have an edge. So a Poincare-Einstein manifold would be such a conformally compact manifold that obeys the Einstein field equations for a vacuum in the interior. What do you think of the recent experiment that proves we're in a simulation? I don't think that there are any. There's like 12 missing scientists, not 4. No, if you go look at the missing scientists, you'll find that only 4 of them were scientists. Like 3 or 4 or something like that. The rest were either engineers or administrative assistants or stuff like that. Nope, not 12. What elementary school did you attend? That's a really specific question. Dead scientist talking point is just UAP, not job cope. Nothing more. Yeah, that's my view. That's my view. What's left to discover but the nature of singularity? What it is? That would be a good place to start. They were probably working on UFOs. No, they weren't. How is there no space beyond matter? If the universe is infinite, then there's matter everywhere. There's no place where there's space but no matter. Is the Hertzsprung-Russell diagram accurate? It's pretty good. 12 missing people working at NASA. They weren't all working at NASA. In fact, most of them were not working at NASA. You accept TSI or Copenhagen as most accurate model? I like the many worlds interpretation. Do you think that we'll make a telescope that will see further than the James Webb? Possibly. Probably a long way off, though. The James Webb has a long lifetime. (2022) they used a version of the double slit experiment to prove that the universe operates like a blank. No, are you referring to the 2022 Nobel Prize? Because the 2022 Nobel Prize was not awarded for experiments done in 2022. You're a leftist or left-handed? I'm a leftist. Can you explain why an electron spin creates magnetic field? That's just what spin things do. That's just what things with spin do. Do you know Edward Witten? No, but I've met him once. Most of them are not marked. Well, look, I mean, so I know that one of the guys was actually killed, and it was probably in an unrelated shooting, because I think that the guy who actually did the shooting also shot up Brown earlier, like the day before or something like that. But like, people just die sometimes, right? Will we ever be able to make a neutrino telescope? In some sense, we already have a few. They're just not super high resolution. I heard a theory of using the gravitational lensing of the sun like a giant telescope lens. Is this reasonable? Reasonable? From a physics perspective, sure. From an engineering and practical perspective, maybe not. Was there a moment that you can recall that made you truly want to pursue physics? Yeah, I saw a picture of a black hole like the one behind me on the horizontal stream, and I'm like, that's cool, I'm going to do that. What does your paper mean when it says a breathing universe is consistent? I'm not learned, so I don't understand. So I couldn't think of a name for this thing, so I called it a breathing universe. But the whole purpose of that paper was just to check whether or not you could get internal consistency from a universe that kind of breathes in and out. There's no crunch, there's no rapid expansion, it's kind of just like a consistently unstable system. And it turns out you can. Why do you have doctor in front of your name? Are you a doctorate? Yeah, I have a PhD. Why was 2022 prize delayed so long? Is the discovery uncomfortable? No. There was a realization made in the early 1900s that if we award Nobel Prizes too early, sometimes we end up having to award Nobel Prizes again for correcting mistakes. So it took so now Nobel Prizes are awarded typically much later, and that's just kind of the standard. It's also not uncomfortable. It's like this is exactly what everybody expected. Like we all knew that this is how the universe is. The Nobel Prize was just a recognition of these people who did this great work. Why does SPDC occur at all in a nonlinear crystals? SPDC is spontaneous parametric down conversion. I do have a video on this from a long time ago. Maybe I should remake it. But basically all that's happening is that the crystal is sufficiently ill-behaved that you can't approximate the electromagnetic wave passing through the crystal just as a superposition of an electromagnetic wave and electron, what are they called? Polaritons. It's just not a good approximation anymore. Why is your node not healed yet? What did they do to it? I lost a lot of skin. And so I'm going to see a dermatologist soon, and I might see a plastic surgeon. Do we know enough to decide whether the various physical constants are contingent or necessary? We do not know enough. No. Interstellar travel, does current physics allow practical execution of it? Physics, yes. Engineering, no. The universe is not locally real. Elaine Aspect and Anton Zellinger. Yeah, true. That means that it's either not local, meaning that it doesn't obey the locality condition of relativity, or it doesn't obey the realism condition of classical mechanics. Realism just being that particles have their properties independent of whether or not they're interacting. It also, they're missing a, like, that's not quite a correct statement. The correct thing that you have to add is, and also there's not a giant conspiracy. From Garain with the $5, is frame dragging a valid gravitational analog to magnetism as both are perpendicular to the force? Yes, yes it is. You can go look into, in fact, you can go look into gravito-electromagnetism, and gravitomagnetism is the lens throwing effect. Does the quality of physics papers ever drop periodically after Nobel Prizes are awarded? I suspect not. I don't know why that would happen. What are null hypersurfaces and what are they used for in physics? A null hypersurface is just any hypersurface. Okay, I should explain. So a hypersurface is like in a four-dimensional spacetime, it's the three-dimensional analog of a two-dimensional surface in three-dimensional space, right? So a surface is two-dimensional and it lives in a three-dimensional space. A hypersurface is just a three-dimensional thing living in a four-dimensional space-time in this case. So a null hypersurface is, you can think of it as sort of the hypersurface that's traced out by the path that light takes. Meaning that it's not temporal, meaning that you can't live on it. You'd have to move at the speed of light to live on it. It's also not spatial, meaning that in some sense it doesn't delineate a moment of time. It's null. And so, for example, the event horizon of a black hole is a null hypersurface. From Joshua Brown with $2, will the universe oscillate? We don't know, but people are looking into it. Physics and mathematics are human constructs. Isn't it amazing how it still works? Yeah. You don't need plastic surgery. You're beautiful the way you are. Well, I have a scar, probably. Almost certainly it's going to form a scar from a screw up done during surgery. So I'd like to get that fixed. Maybe. Depends on how long it would take for recovery and stuff like that. But from Boomer v Zoomer with the 15 shekels, do you think that we will ever have superluminal flight or some other way for interstellar travel at great speed like in sci-fi? I suspect not. At least not superluminal. Best engineering majors you recommend, please? Get a physics degree. What's your favorite theorem? It's Gauss's Theorema of Grecium. Has anyone made that element 115 isotope that Bob Lazar was saying it had anti-gravity isotopes? We've made element 115 and it's horribly unstable. Bob Lazar was just making stuff up. Why would you have to add the caveat that it's not a conspiracy? Because the experiments that Elaine Aspect and Anton Zellinger and the other guy whose name I can't remember, the experiments that they ran don't rule out superdeterminism, which is just the idea that the universe is just a big conspiracy, and quantum mechanics is not actually a correct description of the way the world is. It's just a conspiracy to make it look that way. That's roughly what's, I mean, I'm really butchering superdeterminism, but I don't think of it very, very highly, so. If you have to guess how long until we visit another star, how long? Carl Sagan's cosmic reversibility question. Oh, I don't know. 150 years? How do you feel about LLMs being used to solve math equations that humans cannot? Well, they're not solving math equations. They're proving things that humans hadn't proved yet. I think it's interesting. From Joshua Brown with the $2, engineers versus physicists. Which one is better? Well, obviously physicists, if you make me choose. Any idea where all the dark matter is? Yeah, it's everywhere. From Chuku with the $5, why do other scientists have physics envy? Are the social sciences real sciences? I would say that they're real sciences. They have physics envy because physics has a really good reputation for being rigorous and objective. And other sciences want to have that same degree of rigor. Is it true that we are actually never touching anything? Not really. It just depends on what you mean by touch. Like at the fundamental level, particles are not like little tiny billiard balls that touch each other, right? They're waves. And those waves can overlap, absolutely. What do you think about the density of matter and the density of dark energy being equal right now? Well, they're not equal right now, but they were equal recently. And that's definitely interesting. It's called the cosmic coincidence, or the cosmic coincidence problem. And I made a video about it. And it might be well explained if our universe will not live for very long in the near future. It depends. Why can't things with mass go the speed of light? The simplest answer is that it's just a thing things with mass can't do. But a better explanation is that as you add more energy to a system to speed it up, it gets harder and harder to add more energy to it, or it gets harder and harder to speed it up even more. And you'll just never get there. You can get arbitrarily close, but you'll never get there. What would happen if you stuck your hand in the Large Hadron Collider? You'd probably get like a tiny microscopic hole in the middle. I don't even know if you would feel it though. Is the current consensus leaning more towards string theory or loop quantum gravity? I mean, more people like string theory. More people work on string theory than loop quantum gravity. That's definitely true. But I don't know if there is a consensus at all. Can you explain quantum tunneling? Yeah, quantum tunneling is kind of just basically it's just what happens when a wave leaks through a barrier. You can kind of think of it this way. Imagine that, yeah, okay, so here's an analogy. Imagine that you're like in a soundproof room, but it doesn't have all those baffles, it's just miraculously soundproof. Perhaps not soundproof, but it's sound deafening room. And you set up like a bell so that it resonates perfectly within that room, right? You ring the bell, it has just the right frequency so that it resonates perfectly in that room. The point is that, oh, okay, I guess it doesn't have to resonate perfectly in that room. So then you ring a bell, and somebody outside the room can hear it, because some of the sound wave, just a little bit, kind of leaks through the wall. Well, that's sort of what quantum tunneling is. Where does the stuff go when it enters a black hole? It goes to the middle. How do colliders accelerate particles? They accelerate them with a combination of electric and magnetic fields. Can we calculate the age of the universe based on how far we can see due to the speed of light and not being able to see further than light has had time to travel? In a sense, yeah. But the thing is it's not clear that if you want to use that method, then you need to figure out how far away the thing is, and that's hard to do as well. Would it be right to think of it as friction against spacetime? Is that why mass can't go light speed? No, it's not really friction. Thoughts on all the scientists that died recently? Scientists die, and having 4 scientists die in the last 5 years is really not that surprising. And yes, it is like 4, it's not 12. They were not all scientists. Most of them are engineers or administrative assistants. What's your opinion on that rumored gravity tech that got silenced with those 15 scientists? Why is... People just believe anything. It's made up. It's a conspiracy. It's not real. Let me drink. Let me hydrate. And then let me check to see if there are any cash apps that I missed. Because if I did, I apologize. Okay, let me check. Oh, I guess I don't have to check on my computer. I can check on my, or check on my phone. I can check on my computer. What? Payment? What payment is due? Okay, nothing. All right, let's keep going. Why does mass get lighter the faster it goes? It doesn't. Mass is an invariant of a thing. The mass is something like its inertia from its own reference point of view, from its own reference frame. What is the difference between theoretical physics and mathematical physics? Theoretical physics is just a little bit more physics heavy, whereas mathematical physics is a little bit more math heavy. Do you think vacuum decay is true or just a byproduct of the math? I think it's definitely possible. Do you think there's some exotic form of matter at the center of a black hole? Plausibly, yeah. Personal opinion, is quantum mechanics or relativity more fundamental? Probably quantum mechanics. Do gravitational fields themselves carry entropy, or are the objects can allow us to define entropy? That is a question that we don't know the answer to. That's just the reality of it. We don't know how to talk about entropy. Is it true CERN made miniature black holes in their LHC for time travel? No. They also haven't made miniature black holes. Can you tell us more about quantum Riemannian geometry? No, I don't understand it particularly well. That's why I had a collaborator. Can you explain exactly what dimensions are and how do they change as they go up in number? Why do physicists say there are 20 plus dimensions in the universe? So we have no evidence that there's more than 4 dimensions, more than 4 space-time dimensions. And they don't change. They're just different directions that you can go in space-time. Now, we can think of 3 different directions that you can go in: back and forward, left and right, and up and down. Those are 3 spatial dimensions, and we can also travel forward in time. And that's a fourth temporal dimension. And that's it. That's all we have. That's all we have evidence for. From Swissmax with the 5 Swiss franc. No, that's Swiss francs. Okay. How far are we from solving Navier-Stokes equations? I don't know. I don't work in that area at all, so I don't know what people are working on. I haven't been paying attention to that. People are worried that 15 high-profile people suddenly being killed in mysterious circumstances with everything else going on in the world. Most of what we're being told seems more like a lie. Well, okay, to be fair, these weren't high-profile people. Most of there was literally a secretary that is counted as one of the scientists. These aren't high-profile people. These are just people that were somehow affiliated with something that some people think is somehow related to UFOs or something. These are not all high-profile people. We don't have evidence that they were all killed. We actually have evidence that a lot of them either killed themselves or died of natural causes. Some of them disappeared, and they're probably dead, but we don't know. But yeah, this just the whole narrative is fabricated. Anatoly, oh, that's not a question. Do we honestly think Boltzmann brains are an extant physical object? I suspect that they probably don't exist. How do neutrinoless beta decay occur? Isn't this a double, isn't this, hold on. I never remember which one neutrinoless beta decay is. Oh yeah, it is double beta decay. So what happens is you have a normal, essentially you have a normal beta decay. And then during that process, the neutrino gets absorbed. The neutrino that's emitted during a normal beta decay gets absorbed, and that triggers another beta decay. That's my understanding anyway. Yep, that's correct. Would compounds made from antiatoms have different properties than normal counterparts? Not as far as we can tell, no. Physics is so useless, he says on an app that was only possible because of the computing that was made possible by investigations into physics. Do you think there's more knowledge about gravity and gravitational fields than what the general public is being given? No. How long have you studied physics for, and what branch do you specialize in? I've been doing physics since I was 18. I'm 32 now. Do you use any Diffie-Q or organic chem in your work? I don't use any organic chem, no. Do I use differential equations? Occasionally, yeah. What's your opinion on Amy Eskridge? I made a video about her. She wasn't a scientist. She wasn't working on anti-gravity. She was likely a tragic case of mental illness, which her family agrees with, that, you know, she killed herself, and that's a sign of mental illness. Do Penrose diagrams really suggest multiple universes, or is it a result of the math breaking down? It's not a result of the math breaking down, it's just a result of, in my view anyway, it's a result of the math being extended past where it becomes where it's physically relevant. Thoughts on chemistry? It's neat. I don't know much about it. Do you think time has ontology? I don't know. We talk about quarks or tardigrades. You can talk about whatever you want. I'm not going to stop you. Is it useful to think of gravity as the conservation of time? No, I don't think it is useful to think of it that way. Is nuclear engineering a good major to pick in masters compared to other energy engineering fields? I don't know. I'm not an engineer. I've never been an engineer. How much burden of proof do you personally need to believe UAPs, UFOs exist? I would need to actually, like, see evidence of the actual thing rather than just grainy videos and grainy footage and grainy pictures. Like, if somebody could actually present a non-human biological organism, or present, like, actually publicly present a, you know, a spacecraft, that'd be great. But they can't, and they won't. Do you think Amy Eskridge's death was suspicious? Not really. Do we have anything leading to something that makes up quarks yet? Not as far as I know. I mean, the closest thing we have is string theory, I guess. What's the reason for square instead of a triangle for the plaquette? Just that way then there's a symmetry between space and time. So the way that I was thinking of it is you have two different points of space, and each of them exists for two different points of time. How is the law of conservation of energy valid if there's such an obvious flaw in it? Well, the thing is that in an expanding universe there is no energy conservation. However, on the Earth and in our galaxy, where the expansion has no effect, it is totally reasonable to treat it as a law. It's a perfectly good approximation. From Joshua Brown with the $2. As a physicist, I bet that you can do engineer's work. Maybe. I'd probably take some training, though. Are quantum computers entangled over multiple universes? No, that's not really how entanglement works, even if you believe in the many worlds interpretation. I believe Bob, ex-military contractor here. Okay, well, you shouldn't believe Bob. How fast does water need to be going to hold a somewhat solid shape? I don't know what you mean by hold a solid shape. It's a liquid. But if you're talking about laminar flow, it's not about speed. It's about uniformity of flow. Is it possible to use neutrinos as some form of communication since it can go right through everything? Yes, and I've made a video about this. This has been done, actually. It's just really inefficient because we have a really, really hard time detecting neutrinos. What about the other 13 scientists? Why does the number keep increasing? There were not 13 scientists. Most of them were engineers or administrative assistants. There were only a few scientists. And We know what happened to most of them. People die sometimes. Where does the energy go from cosmological redshift as the wavelengths become shorter? It doesn't go anywhere. It's gone. It's an example of the failure of energy to be conserved. A physicist? I've only stopped off for short periods and thought this was a flat Earth debut kind of channel, for want of a better term. PhD? Yep, I have a PhD in physics. Any tips on getting through Calc 2? That was so long ago for me. No, I don't know. I'd have to think about it more. Curious if the universe is infinite or finite. I was always told that the universe is infinite and expanding for an infinite amount of time. Is this correct? We don't know whether it's infinite temporally. We also don't know if it's infinite spatially, but it's plausibly both. Can't read. When is statistical physics thermodynamics used instead of classical thermodynamics? When you have a whole bunch of something. What do you think we fundamentally misunderstood about reality? I don't know. What's up? Maybe coffee. You. Guys, my wife loves me so much. I love her so much because, you know, she's the best. The many worlds interpretation is more implausible by the day. Okay, well, what's the evidence against it? Do you have any experience in any programming languages or using MATLAB? I don't use MATLAB. I use Maple, but I do have experience in Python and Java. In the normalization group flow, why do coupling constants run? Why do they run? Essentially because what's the right way to explain this? So the good example would be electromagnetism. Full calf. The good example is electromagnetism. So in quantum field theory, you can kind of think of a single electron, say, being shielded by virtual electron-positron pairs. And also, you know, well, yeah, that's the way to think about it, virtual electron-positron pairs. And as you get closer, i.e. as you get to higher energy, the electron is being shielded by fewer and fewer, so the charge goes up. The effective charge goes up. It feels like there's more charge there. That's the idea. That's an intuitive idea that, you know, we're always taught. Now, why this happens, it comes about from doing loop calculations, basically. Oh. Do you see any future for increasing collaboration between archaeology and physics as a student? Not really as far as collaboration to advance physics, but perhaps collaboration to advance archaeology using things like muon tomography. How many crackpots do you deal with regularly? A lot. A lot. Should cosmological redshift be studied more? I mean, there's not a lot to study. The Doppler effect, it works on light, so if you move fast enough, can it turn radioactive? Light isn't radioactive, but what it can do is it can become ionizing radiation, yes. Is the universe closed or open? We don't know. Seems like it's open. Or actually, it seems like it's flat. Some people would say that open means flat, but not necessarily. Wait, so energy is not conserved? Yeah, it's not conserved at a global scale, definitely. What's your opinion on theist physicists? As long as they don't let their theism ruin their physics, I don't mind. The center of mass of the universe should stay at a point because it's an isolated system, right? Can't we define where that point is? It's not clear that there is a center of mass for the universe. Think about it this way. Imagine that you lived on a balloon, and then you just sprinkled dust on the surface of the balloon. Where's the center of mass of the dust? Well, it's not on the balloon. It doesn't have a center of mass. Just came from John Cohen. Well, thank you, John Cohen, for sending people over, I guess. Getting an extra long AAP today. Yeah, we're going to be doing these from now on until for longer. How much delay is there? It's not that there's delay, it's just that I'm behind. If it's finite, could you ever reach the end? What would the end or edge? So if the universe is finite, it still doesn't have an edge. Think about how, like, the surface of a sphere doesn't have an edge, or how Pac-Man's world, where you can go on one side and come out the other side, how that doesn't have an edge. You like Star Trek? I love Star Trek. Does adding curvature even mean anything in QFT? Yes, and it makes it way worse. Newton was a physicist, he is a Christian and smarter than me. He probably was smarter than me. He was also, like, crazy dumb about some things. Not dumb, crazy deluded about something. He thought alchemy was real. Just published my first paper and the amount of crackpot comments, reference, suggestions is crazy. Really? So, I don't get crackpot comments on my publications. I just get them because I do science communication stuff. Thank you. How many sugar cubes? I've been using. It's okay, I can deal with 3. That's fine. From the darkened sadness with the $5, do you believe that we are being pushed outward or pulled due to the edge of the universe expansion? The universe doesn't have an edge. At least as far as we can tell, there's no reason to think that the universe has an edge. Is a neutrino a lepton or hadron? It's a lepton. And we have no idea how it gets its mass. Its mass is too small, thank you.
Welcome for the
Thank
sugar
you.
cube.
Newton is likely dumber than the average scientist today. I don't know. I think that he was very, very clever. I think that he just believed a lot of things that were obviously wrong by today's standards. What do you mean the universe? If the universe is finite, we can't reach the edge. If the universe is, it could be finite. Like the surface of the Earth is finite, right? There's a finite amount of surface area, and yet there's no edge to the surface of the Earth. Rank these 3: Einstein, Newton, and Neil deGrasse Tyson. Einstein, Newton, Neil deGrasse Tyson. Put back on the sugar. Look, I have a sweet tooth, okay? The edge is just the observable universe. The observable universe isn't the edge of the universe. At least we don't have good reason to think so. What is the use of the sum of all natural numbers equals minus a 12th? It shows up in string theory of all places. By the way, everybody, or by the way, Babs. Babs. You can't hear me, never mind. Yeah, I did something stupid this morning, so she's annoyed at me. That's why. But it's fine. Are you employed? This is part of my employment, yeah. Hello, this is my first time here. What do you believe existed before the Big Bang? I think that there was probably more universe before the Big Bang. At least that's, I kind of lean that way. Einstein over Newton? Yeah, I think so. Just barely, but I think that Einstein ekes out. Like, the thing is Einstein wasn't really wrong about anything. And he also contributed across a whole slew of fields. Newton didn't really contribute anything to, say, electromagnetism, as far as I know. Like, there were people studying electromagnetism in his time, and, like, you know, he didn't really do much for that. He did mechanics, and he did gravity. Einstein did basically everything. He even invented a refrigerator. Why the Neil hate? It's not Neil hate to say that Neil deGrasse Tyson is way below Einstein and Newton. Now do the rank again, but with your name. Einstein, Newton, Blitz, Neil deGrasse Tyson. And I'm not going to tell you what order Blitz and Neil deGrasse Tyson were in. Why is the cosmological constant so small? It's a good question. We don't know. What's the last digit of pi? 5. And I dare you to check. From Bob Ross with the $5. I know there aren't many, but are there any religious academics in your field today that you respect and engage with? Does anyone specific come to mind? So I haven't engaged with him, but there's a physicist named Aaron Wall. Aaron C. Wall, it's spelled A-R-O-N. And he's a devout Christian. And he's also a really accomplished physicist. So I'm familiar with his work. Oh, almost just spilled my coffee. That would have been miserable. Delayed choice quantum eraser experiment. Discuss. What about it? What about Tesla? Tesla wasn't a scientist. He made calculus? I mean, sure he did. Well, arguably Leibniz did, but yeah. Didn't Newton contribute to optics? Yeah, so he did, but I was talking about like the Coulomb kind of magnetism stuff, electricity stuff. Einstein didn't believe in the atom model before it was proved. Einstein was the one who proved the atomic model. Like that, he was the one who did that. Didn't Einstein do the photoelectric effect? Yeah, he did. The photoelectric effect proved that photons existed. He was the one who proved that photons existed by explaining the photoelectric effect. He was also the one who proved that atoms existed by explaining Brownian motion. Right? This is what, like, people don't know that, but Einstein did not win his Nobel Prize for relativity. He won his Nobel Prize for proving that atoms exist. I'm sorry, no, he won his Nobel Prize for the photoelectric effect, not for Brownian motion. Neil would probably agree with me, yeah. Oh, well, yeah, except he might not agree with me as far as Einstein being over Newton. Alan Turing, he invented modern computing. He did, you're right. How long does it take to become a physicist? Depends on where you start counting. Arguably, it's going to take you 3 or 4 years to get your bachelor's degree and then another 5 to 7 years to get your PhD. And arguably, by that point, you're a physicist. How is Tesla not a scientist? What criteria are you applying for a scientist? He wasn't contributing to scientific research. He was an inventor and an engineer, and a talented one at that. But he wasn't doing, like, scientific research, right? He just wasn't. He wasn't publishing in scientific journals. He wasn't performing scientific experiments. He was an engineer and an inventor. He wasn't trying to better understand the way the world worked. He was trying to well, okay, actually, maybe he was trying to understand the world worked, but he wasn't doing it in a very efficient way or effective way. What is Brownian motion? So if you take like a particle of dust, or like like pollen or something, and you put it in water, and then you look at it through a microscope, that pollen particle, which is itself very tiny, but it's still like a pollen particle, will just like appear to randomly move around. And the question is why? Why is it moving so randomly? From the Darkened Sadness with the $10, are there any studies theories that have assumed an edge of the universe when attempting calculations of expansion? If not, would you discount the possibility of such? People have thought about this. This shows up in it's not even really an edge proper. No, not really. Because there's something fundamentally wrong with this idea that the universe has an edge. Because the universe is not a circle, right? We're not like the inside of a circle. So, I mean, you could try to do such a thing, but we have no reason that there is an edge. Also, the edge effects would be really, really dynamical, and that would be strange. But yeah, I mean, as far as I know, there's no non-fringe cosmological theory that makes the claim that the universe has an edge. At least as far as I know. TikTok needs a Q&A tool. It absolutely does. 100% it does. Hey, Doubting Thomas, thank you for becoming a Prime subscriber. I appreciate that. Has dark energy weakened with time? That's a possibility, at least. Pi is provably irrational. As such, it has no last digit, and so it isn't 5. I beg to differ. The last digit of pi in base 2 pi, it is indeed 5. That would be the last digit of pi in base 2 pi, I guess. That's not true. You're right, you got me. Have you ever had offers from hedge funds since you have a physics PhD? No, I think that's a myth from the past. If no edge, what about a boundary? A boundary is an edge. Kitty cat, what's wrong? Come here. She's crying because she wants her medicine, I think. Oh, while I'm here, I should probably take a break to shill for myself. Just as a reminder, everybody. Let me double check something really quick. Just as a reminder, if you want to support me, if you like this kind of content, I can tell when people subscribe or become paying members on YouTube or become subscribers on TikTok, like superfans or whatever they're called. I can tell if you do that during this live versus doing it during some other live. We have the analytics on that. And so if you like this kind of content, now is the time to send super chats. Now is the time to send cash apps, which I keep track of. Now is the time to become a member on YouTube or a super fan on TikTok or a subscriber on Twitch. It does help me because it in some sense helps me more than super chats do, because it gives me a degree of consistency that I can come to expect, and I can build that into any future purchases I make to improve my streaming setup and things like that. So that helps. And if you don't have the money to do that, which is fine, I totally get that, then consider subscribing on YouTube, becoming a follower on TikTok, or just following along on Twitch. That helps me out too. And if you want to see more of my research, if you want to see more of what I do, check out my website. It's just blitz.phd. There's no .com, just blitz.phd. So it's very much appreciated if you guys check it out. You can send me messages if you want to, but please don't spam me. And from Genghis Khan with the subscribing on Twitch as well, thank you so much. I appreciate you. All right, let's go back to answering some questions. Any philosopher physicist? Yeah, Sean Carroll's probably the best example. The most popular example, perhaps. Combining 2 light atoms gives more... Oh, okay, that's not a question. They say there's no edge because their own microwave radar range is spherical, so the result is a spherical surface shell. No, that's not why we say that there's no edge. No, because we're talking about an edge of a 3-dimensional thing, not an edge of a 2-dimensional thing. And the CMB produces a 2-dimensional sphere, which would be an edge of a 3-dimensional ball or a boundary of a 3-dimensional ball, but that's not what we're talking about when we say the universe doesn't have an edge. Any advice for the physics GRE? Study more than I did. Is there anything that Bob Lazar said that you know is false because the physics is wrong? Yeah, that element 115 is stable. That there are any stable isotopes of 115 that are more stable than isotopes of 116 or 114. Can you describe the weirdest rocket you've made in KSP? I never made weird rockets. I just made huge rockets that have enormous surface to orbit payload efficiency. What do you think of Abdus Salam, the Muslim physicist who worked with Steven Weinberg, who's an accomplished physicist? How was it getting a PhD? I loved it. But I know that that's not a lot. I know that that's not true for a lot of people. Do TikTok subscribers get access to the debate resources? Unfortunately, no. I have no idea how to give those kinds of perks on TikTok. If somebody wants to DM me, if they know how to do this, please let me know. I'd love to, because I know that a lot of people watch me on TikTok, but the reality is that TikTok doesn't let me post. There's like, I can send a message to subscribers, or to fans, or super fans or whatever they're called, but you can't post links there. And so it's really not clear to me, I think. And like I tried different ways around it and it didn't work. So I'm not sure how to give you guys perks if you are on a super fan on TikTok, which is why I would recommend becoming a super fan on YouTube instead, or a member on YouTube instead. It's only like $4 if you join via the vertical stream, and it's $5 if you join on the horizontal stream. Not because I'm charging you for the horizontal stream, just because those were the defaults when I initiated the program, and once you have members you can't change the prices, and now we're stuck like this. But that's what I would advise if you want to support me in that way. Is it possible the universe behaves differently beyond the observable? Yeah, but it would be very, very strange that for some reason we are in the middle of the universe, right? How long does it take to publish a paper? It really depends. So writing a paper can take however long it takes to figure out the idea that you're trying to write, right? And so that can take forever if the idea is complicated and you're stuck on it. But once you've written the paper, going from having written the paper, it's done, to getting it published can take a long time or very little time, depends on the journal that you're publishing in, the field that you're publishing in, whether you have to make corrections. So I've had a paper that's gone from submitted to accepted in 3 months. I've also had a paper that went from submitted to fights with the referee to corrections being made to finally accepted 2 years later. So it really just depends on the field and the paper and the journal. Why didn't you answer the isotope question? You keep saying element. Well, look, the point is there are like we know how the physics of, we know how nuclear physics works. There will be no elements, there will be no isotopes of element 115 that are more stable than isotopes of element 114 or 116, because odd integer elements are less stable than even integer elements. Even atomic number elements, I should say. Have you studied medical physics? Not really. Why do you think some physicists become atheists? Probably because it's true, and physicists know a lot about how the world works. How long? Oh, I already answered that. Are you married? Yeah. I just got a fleur fly right after mine. I'm sorry. What do physicists mean by a field? For instance, what is the field part in quantum field? So a field is, you can think of a field as just as a function, if you know what a function is mathematically. So a function takes an input and spits out an output, right? It could take as an input a color and spit out a list of people for whom that is their favorite color. But a function takes an input, spits out an output, and the point is that for a given input, it can only have one output. It can't have multiple outputs. That's what a function is. So a field is a kind of function. It takes as an input 3 spatial coordinates and 1 temporal coordinate, so x, y, z, and t. When we're talking about fields in physics, it takes in as input 4 variables, basically the space-time position, or a space-time event, and it spits out something. Now, for scalar fields, it spits out just a number. For complex scalar fields, or for real scalar fields, it spits out a number. For complex scalar fields, it spits out a complex number. For vector fields, it spits out a vector. For quantum fields, it spits out a quantum operator. So that's all a field is. It's a kind of mathematical object that takes in a position, a space-time position, and outputs something. Metaface Pius just became a member on, I don't know why. Metaface Pius just became a member on YouTube, which is very much appreciated. Thank you so much. Have publishers become more weary of AI, or is it still the same as before AI? So this is actually interesting. As far as I can tell, they're very weary of AI. I actually I submitted a paper for publication. It recently got accepted at a different journal, but I submitted a paper for publication in a journal called Physics of the Dark Universe, and originally in the acknowledgments of the paper, I put, we would like to acknowledge the use of OpenAI's tool ChatGPT for finding and providing a reference, or providing a resource to find various references. Because for that paper, one of the things I did is I said, look, I have this, I know about this thing. I want you to find me like the best references for it. Just because, you want to make sure that you're not missing references. That's an annoying thing that referees often get caught up in. They're like, oh, well, you didn't reference this original paper because you referenced something later. And so I'm like, okay, I'll use ChatGPT to like do that, to find me the kind of canonical references that I would get yelled at for not including, even if I didn't actually use them. And so I put that in the acknowledgement section. And when I submitted it to the journal, they said you have to take that out of the acknowledgement section. It's not allowed. You can't indicate that you used any AI for this paper. And that was kind of weird. I'm like, here I am trying to be intellectually honest and tell you that I used ChatGPT to find these references. And they wanted me not to do that. And I understand why, because AI, of course, does hallucinate references sometimes. But of course, I checked the references myself. They weren't fake, right? Like, I did check the references. I just used them I just used ChatGPT as a repository. But that was kind of weird. And so I imagine it's gotten worse. That was a year ago. So I don't know. How many pages was my PhD? Like 180, I think? Something like that. But I think like the last 40 pages was basically code and then explanation for the code. Do you think this will change as AI becomes better and more reliable? Probably, but it might take a generation. What is your purview on a type 2 Kardashev civilization technology like Dyson Sphere, Swarm, and Matryoshka Sphere? Matryoshka Brain, rather. I don't have any opinions on it. ChatGPT is awesome, not because it's useful, but because it rage baits leftist slop artists. I don't know what that means. So did you get a C in school? No. I don't think I've ever gotten a C in any classes ever. Here, by the way, is our Discord admin. And I mean, basically my channel assistant, she does like all of the things. She helps out with all of the moderation stuff. She, helps me she helped me set up my Twitch account so that it has all the emojis. She's the, she is the right-hand woman of the channel. Lilith goes by Succubusy everywhere, most places. And so she's just writing to remind you, I have a Twitch channel that you can go be a part of. It's twitch.tv/blitzphd. So if you like Twitch more than YouTube or TikTok, I will be live there whenever I'm live. I'm using deep research on your plaquette paper to see if it surfaces any improvement ideas. Please don't do that. That's kind of annoying. Why aren't we playing our game? Okay, so I'll be honest with you guys. So there's kind of two things that happen. One, okay, the correct answer is something like Lou was talking about why am I not playing KSP, right? Kerbal Space Program. The first answer is that I can't really answer questions very efficiently or very effectively when I'm playing Kerbal Space Program. And what that means is that people who aren't interested in watching gameplay and who want to have their questions answered, they don't stick around. Secondly, the reality is that so far when I've been doing Kerbal Space Program, I get almost no super chats, which is fine when I'm doing it on my off time like I do on Saturdays, just for funsies. But considering that this is part of my work hours and one of the ways that I fund my research, doing Ask a Physicist, where there is good encouragement to super chat, because then you're guaranteed to get your question answered, that's more productive for me. It means that I can, count on that as it's more reliable income to do Ask a Physicist rather than Kerbal Space Program. So for the time being, we're going to be doing Kerbal Space Program on Saturdays. I'm going to test a program or test a situation. I'm going to have my wife read the questions to me while I'm playing Kerbal Space Program, so maybe I can answer as many questions as I typically do on an Ask a Physicist, and we'll see how that goes this Saturday. But as it stands, like, it's it's a difference of like 10x, right? Which is annoying. That's the reality that we're in. And also, but I'm not gonna, it's not like 100% greed motivated, right? Or greed oriented, right? Like, at the end of the day, this is more educational. So I'm not gonna be like, oh, I'm just doing this just for, like, this is more educational. And if it also generates more revenue, I'm not gonna complain. Can you give some advice about becoming a physicist? Go to grad school. That's what you have to do at the end of the day. But we are going to try the Ask a Physicist / Kerbal Space Program this Saturday. Well, as a pilot thing. Because the thing is I'm focused on the game, and so I can't be reading questions. So if somebody's reading me the questions, then I can answer them. I hope. At least that's the thought. are you going or are you in academia at the moment? In some sense, I'm in academia right now. I'm still publishing. I'm going to conferences. Actually, I need to register for a conference that's in 2 months. But the idea is, but I don't work at a university. So make of that what you will. What do you think are the acceptable uses of AI in research and in the workplace? I don't know. I don't know what's considered acceptable, right? From literally Lou with the $5 Australian. Take my money. I will. Thank you very much. I mean, at the end of the day, this is my job, right? Like most of my funding, not all of it, but most of my funding comes from, most of my income comes from doing live streams and making science content, right? So, you know, gotta pay the bills. Just sub tier 2 is Small Duck on YouTube. Well, thank you. I don't know why I'm not seeing the sub sometimes. I need to, so I have like a separate thing for like all, anyway, I need to fix some stuff. But I'll work on it. Would you rather have majored in philosophy if not physics? Maybe. Claude or ChatGPT for reference finding? I hate Claude. I have not had a good time trying to use Claude. I tried it when designing my website and it was a pain in the ass. Thank you for the galaxy, Jason. I appreciate that. Have you read the recent paper in quantum calculations on using CTC to send messages back in time? No, I don't think so. How do you publish without an affiliation to list on the article? Well, I do technically still have an affiliation with the university that I did my postdoc at. It's just not a paid position. But even if I didn't have an affiliation, that's fine. I don't need one. That said, if that affiliation ever ends, I could probably just go to my local university and be like, hey, can you give me an unpaid position so that I can get an affiliation? So then your university gets credit and I get a .edu email address. Do you have to declare your funding? It'd be funny to see TikTok live in it. No. So the reason why, so like this is like my salary. That's the way to think about it. Although, actually, oh, there was these. Okay, so I missed some subscriptions on. Oh, so Doubting Thomas and Smokey RP also subscribed with Prime, which is much appreciated. So there is one person that I do thank in my papers. So there's a version, there's a tier that I have on my Patreon account. I call it like the Medici tier, because it's kind of like, you guys know how the Medici family in Italy, they helped finance some of Galileo's work, or at least like a lot of it actually. They kind of were like his patron. They basically gave him a lot of money and he went and did science. And so I'm like, well, look, if some people like to support the science content that I do, some people like to support the live streams that I do, but I didn't actually have an option to just directly support the research that I do. And so there's an option, very, very expensive option, to support the research that I do directly rather than going through my science content or my streaming content on Patreon. That's available. And if you become a patron, there's only 5 slots available for that. If you become a patron there, I will just directly acknowledge you in all of my publications. And also there's some other perks like, you know, quarterly meetings to update you on my research and things like that. So that's an option if people who have a lot of excessive money want to do that. From Corin Laprio with the $2, where to get started learning thermodynamics? So I learned thermodynamics at university. I did not have a good time. I did not have good professors both times that I did it. And so I don't know of a good book for thermodynamics, unfortunately. Like, it's really frustrating, but I haven't seen a good one. So if anybody in the comments has a good suggestion for a good thermodynamics book, like I don't know which one it is, but I mean, you're going like there's probably maybe MIT OpenCourseWare will probably have a lecture on it, or you know a series on it maybe. So do you have any advice for writing a lab report as quickly as possible? Invent a time machine, go back in time, and then don't procrastinate. I've heard quantum mechanics has some contradictions. Do we affirm those or say, I don't know what's true yet? I don't know what contradictions quantum mechanics has. I haven't heard about these. Is there jealousy of other success in the physics workspace? Yeah, surely. Many Worlds fan? I am, yeah. How can you do research in Notebook? You still need to confirm with experiment. I'm not an experimentalist. That's what the experimentalists are for, and they have the expensive equipment. I need a notebook and a computer. If the universe is expanding, what's it expanding into? Not expanding into anything. When we say the universe is expanding, what we mean is if you have like two things that are not gravitationally bound together, then the distance between them is growing. And that's true for any two things that are not gravitationally bound together. So the standard book for thermo does not mean it's a good book for thermo. Have you ever tried to debate flat earthers on TikTok? I'll have you know. Jesus Christ, gifts more than $5 on TikTok joined, repeated my question at least 20 questions. What? At least 20 times? Oh, play harder. I'm so sorry. Here's the thing about TikTok gifts, and this it's just reality. I can't affiliate the gifts with the name. It doesn't pop up, like your messages don't get like prioritized on the way that I do this. But I didn't know, so I'm gonna go look for your message. So give me a sec, okay? Like I wish TikTok had a way that you could like send a super chat kind of equivalent, but it doesn't have a way to do that, which is why I would recommend that if you want to support me and you want to ask a question, do it through YouTube. Not seeing it. If you want to send it again, play harder, I'll just answer it right away. I'll just look on my other screen. From Saint Deluded with the $5. If it were possible to move at the speed of light and you turned on a flashlight at that speed, what theoretically would happen? Well, we can't answer that with physics because you can't move at the speed of light. But if you move very, very close to the speed of light and then you turn on a flashlight at that speed, then what you'll find is that it still looks like it's moving at the speed of light. I got blocked from posting it? That's strange. Play harder, do you just want to DM me on TikTok your question? And I'll just pull it up right now. Yeah, if you want to DM me, that might help. Can you also check? Yeah, but can you also please check Buy Me a Coffee? I can. Yeah, so there's just a lot. Like, I wish that there was a way to get all of these apps in one place. By the way, David Roberts did send $5 on Cash App for what's your favorite sci-fi movie? It's got to be Star Trek 4. Actually, that's a lie. Project Hail Mary is probably my favorite sci-fi movie these days. And I'm supposed to check Buy Me a Coffee too, which Sheor, thank you. Do you think reality is probabilistic or deterministic on the fundamental level, i.e. quantum randomness real or just apparent? I think that it's apparent because I'm a many worlds person. So in the many worlds, every reality or every quantum possibility is realized. It's just we're only in one universe, so it looks like it's random. That's my view. But thank you. Let me check for play harder. Oh, okay, I got your question, by the way. Are the next breakthroughs in physics beyond our current ability to test? Yes, yeah, they are. I mean, like, if it's the case that string theory is true, we don't have the ability to test that right now. People are trying to work out ways to test these questions using more like indirect methods, but we don't have the power to directly test these things these days, at least not yet. Oh, I hope he's here so that he heard the question, heard the answer. If he doesn't, I'll send him a DM later and explain my answer. That's my bad. I just need, like, I wish I could grab Cash App and Buy Me a Coffee and put it into the same, because like I have Twitch, TikTok, and YouTube all in one place, but those ones are not synced. So anyway, but thank you guys for being so generous. Are you currently working on a paper? I'm currently working on like 3. Is it 3? Let me pull up in my notepad. I have a notepad of just a whole bunch of all the projects that I'm working on. So yeah, there's like 3 projects that I'm actively spending time on. And there's a few things that I have in the back burner that I'm not actively working on. Oh, it's noon. Okay, well, I'll end the live shortly. But would you consider yourself a high-tier physicist on TikTok? Oh, on TikTok, yeah, definitely. On TikTok, yeah, obviously. There aren't a lot of physicists on TikTok. Now, does that mean that I'm a high-tier physicist in the real world? Who knows? But Popplestone, thank you for becoming a subscriber via Prime on Twitch. It's much appreciated. From Jimmy White, I think I could smoke this dude concerning anything he wanted to debate, and now I feel much better getting that out. Okay. If you check Streamlabs, it has donation alerts. No, I haven't. I'll see if I can sync up Cash App or something with it, but the issue is that Cash App's like a separate thing. I guess we're not taking guests. No, not today. I was just keeping it free for all today, but we are going to tomorrow. Sorry, Holy Gore. Did I say that I was going to take guests later? I thought I said I was going to take guests tomorrow. How do you get in contact with other physicists when you want to collaborate on paper? I email them. I usually use my .edu email address because it's less likely to get thrown into the spam folder. Anyway, guys, it is noon, and I need to go eat some lunch. And if I don't eat lunch now, I will just be a sad boy. So I'm going to go do that, which means I'm going to end the live. But there will be more of this around the same time tomorrow, starting at 9 a.m. Pacific time. We will start the first half of the Popplestone sent the message, love your science content here and on TikTok. Keep up the great work. I appreciate that. So tomorrow we're going to start at 9 a.m. Pacific time for the normal Ask a Physicist here, where I just answer everybody's questions. And then an hour and a half in, I'm going to switch to members only chat. So anybody will be able to watch, but members only chat. And I'm also going to be taking up guests during that time to ask questions, over voice instead of just over chat. So thank you guys so much, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Make sure to go check out my website. It's blitz.phd, no .com, just